All right, let's just dive right into an explainer that honestly completely flips how we view the most famous book in human history. I mean, most of us grew up being taught that the Bible is this kind of dusty history textbook, right? Like it's supposed to give us this exhaustive timeline of ancient events. But what if it's not trying to do that at all? What if actually it's operating way more like a highly optimized software architecture? One that's designed specifically for human formation. So today we're unpacking this fascinating theory that the biblical text is essentially a compressed memory system. It's not just there to record facts, it's there to preserve the exact transitions that permanently reshape humanity.
Okay, so we start with a major glitch in the Matrix. Genesis gives us this incredibly dramatic, tragic story of Cain and Abel, right? But then, right after the murder, the judgment, the exile, the text just completely fast forwards. It literally skips the next 900 years of Cain's life. And it kind of leaves you wondering, why on earth does this book leave out so much actual history? Because Cain almost certainly worked, he raised kids, taught them skills, grew old, died, the whole shebang. So why is literally none of that recorded? Did the authors just, forget? Or were they doing something much more intentional?
Well, the contrast here is super revealing. Think about a modern history book. It tries to be exhaustive, it wants to chronicle every little detail. But the biblical narrative? Totally different ballgame. The Bible is definitely not a reality show called Ancient People Doing Laundry. It deliberately ignores the boring Tuesdays. It completely skips over the ordinary continuity of centuries to focus purely on the moments that permanently alter humanity's trajectory. So it's not missing information. It's actually practicing extreme narrative compression.
Which brings us to the absolutely crucial point. This text operates as a compressed state transition architecture. Now, in systems theory, a state transition is just an event that permanently alters the accessible future of a system. So the Bible behaves way less like an exhaustive historical archive and more like a highly compressed educational system. It preserves those high-impact transition points. Think of them as the load-bearing hinges of human history, while just kind of assuming that ordinary life kept chugging along in the background.
And you can really picture the entire thesis like this. Think of the text as a massive memory architecture. The roots hold the foundational stories, and the branches grow through every successive generation. The whole design prioritizes transformation over mere information. It's an educational system meant to help future generations totally reconstruct their identity before God.
To really see how this architecture builds, we've got to look at time itself. See, the ancient Greeks had two different words for time, chronos and kairos. Chronos is just your ordinary linear measurable time, the steady ticking of the clock. But Kairos is decisive time. Those are the formative moments where literally everything changes. The authors of Scripture essentially edited the human story by skipping ordinary chronos time and zooming straight in on Kairos events. I mean, think of the fall, the flood, the Exodus, or the resurrection. These aren't just dates on a calendar, they're the load-bearing hinges where the covenant state of humanity changes forever.
And this compression, it actually extends to how the text uses numbers too. Whenever you see a number like 40 in the text, it's basically acting like a narrative hyperlink. It's waving a little flag trying to tell you, hey, get ready, somebody is about to be tested. You see it with 40 days of rain during the flood, 40 years wandering in the wilderness, Jesus fasting for 40 days. It's definitely not just an arbitrary count.
Think of these numbers as our built-in decoder ring. They aren't just math homework sneaking into religion. They are memory tabs. They're actively training our brains to recognize recurring divine patterns across centuries. 7 points to sacred order and completion, 12 points to covenant peoplehood, 3 is this rhythm of transition and confirmation. When these numbers pop up, the text is training you to recognize the shape of the story you're in, and it's linking these incredibly distant events together into one coherent architecture.
And just like numbers, biblical dreams work the same way. They aren't just weird nighttime cartoons where, a giant talking sandwich is chasing you. They are compressed transition mechanisms. A dream enters the present, rearranges the furniture of the mind, and steers the future. Just think of Joseph in Genesis. His dreams of bowing sheaves of wheat weren't just personal predictions, right? They immediately modified his present state by making his brothers furious, which led to his exile, which eventually saved Egypt and his whole family from famine. The dream is just a tiny scene, but it has massive downstream effects.
To see how this architecture builds on a massive scale, just look at the book of Exodus. It was absolutely not just a stressed-out camping trip or a simple A to B relocation. It was a national boot camp. Because you can't just drop 1 million enslaved people in the desert and expect a unified nation to pop out. They had to be trained. Manna taught them daily dependence. The law gave them a framework to avoid total chaos. Even their complaining, which they did a lot of, was actually necessary to expose their interior disorder so it could be corrected. The wilderness was literally the school where they were formed.
You know, delivering deep, transformative truths about the human condition really requires a touch of wonder and, honestly, a lot of profound humanity. As the great Gene Wilder so brilliantly put it, if you're going to tell the truth, you'd better make them laugh, otherwise they'll kill you. And Scripture uses this exact same principle. It uses irony, surprising reversals, and deeply human flaws to deliver its hardest truths, which allows us to recognize ourselves in the story without being totally crushed by the weight of it.
Which brings us to arguably the most paradigm-shifting concept of this entire framework. The biblical text isn't meant to just be observed from the sidelines. It is a simulator designed for you to step into. It is literally a flight simulator for the human soul. It preserves these high-impact transitions so that we can learn from them without having to personally endure every single historical catastrophe.
I mean, think about how we train in the modern world. Pilots use flight simulators to practice engine failures without crashing real planes. Doctors use medical simulators to practice surgery without risking human lives. Well, the Bible works on the exact same principle. You don't need to personally ruin everything and become the first murderer just to learn the lesson of Cain. Through practices like Passover, the Eucharist, or honestly even simple church plays, we actually participate in these high-impact transitions. We step into the preserved script to gain wisdom and formation without, causing the disaster ourselves. And educational theorist David Kolb's learning cycle proves exactly why this participation matters so much. Learning isn't just downloading data into your brain. It requires concrete experience, reflection, conceptualization, and active experimentation. Actually stepping into the biblical script, whether through reading, liturgy, or practice, it reorganizes our future perception. It gives us a state-changing encounter that goes so far beyond just memorizing facts for a test.
Because the difference between observation and participation is massive. Reading about swimming, that's just information. But getting pushed into the pool by your cousins? Oh, that is formation. And the Bible is structured so that you actually get pushed into the pool. It demands that you participate, that you answer the questions it poses, and that you allow the text to actively modify your present state and your future identity.
So what you should really take away from this is that while the events of the Bible are historically in the past, the text itself is developmentally in the future. The script isn't finished. It's this incredibly durable architecture that every single new generation continues to enter. It's a script that is still wide open, still active, and still operating on human minds and hearts right now, today.
It reminds me again of Gene Wilder, this time playing Willy Wonka, when he warned us, time is a precious thing, never waste it. We are all currently occupying our own present state, and the traces of these ancient stories, these incredibly carefully selected and preserved Kairos moments, they're designed to modify us right now, shaping the time we have left. The past reaches us in the present to change our future.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, kind of provocative thought. If your own life was run through this exact same architecture, if it was compressed down to only the moments that permanently changed your story, completely skipping all the ordinary Tuesdays, what scenes would actually make the final cut? And even more importantly, which of those transitions are you intentionally preserving to pass down so that the next generation can learn, adapt, and become what comes next? Something to chew on. Keep learning, keep reflecting, and I'll catch you next time.